was classified as a planet until 2006, Bill, and that's when some new rules disqualified it. No longer a planet for different reasons. Couldn't clear the neighborhood. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not an astronomer. But
poor Pluto.
I know.
It's
poor
beating
Pluto.
around a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know.
Have a great day.
Nice to be here
with
with
you.
you.
A long day, all right?
Back tomorrow, 4 a.m.
Cool. Outnumbered starts right now. Bye-bye.
Fox News alerts stunning developments in alleged hate crime investigation widely discussed across the country. Actor Jussie Smollett claimed he was assaulted by two masked men, but now Chicago police say they no longer consider him a victim in this case. This is Outnumbered, and I'm Melissa Francis, here today, the host of Kennedy on the Fox Business Network. Kennedy. Reporter for Fox News Headline 24/7, Carly Shimkus. Fox News contributor and national security analyst Morgan Ortegas, and on the couch, editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller News Foundation, Christopher Bedford. There you go. We're going to hop right to it. Police releasing two Nigerian brothers that they briefly held for questioning in the reported attack against Smollett. And Chicago police now say the, quote, trajectory of the investigation has shifted. Mike Tobin is live in Chicago with the latest, Mike.
And Melissa, I just got a statement from Smollett's team. Let me read it to you verbatim. There are no plans for Jussie Smollett to meet with Chicago police today. Any news reports suggesting otherwise are inaccurate. That is in reference to a report that ran in the Chicago Sun-Times today, this morning, saying that he might submit to this interview that police are requesting. It goes on to say Smollett's attorneys will keep an active dialogue going with Chicago police on his behalf. We have no further comment today. Now, Smollett's team has been saying that he is further victimized by the claims that he staged his own attack. Over the weekend, police told me that Smollett is no longer considered a victim in this case. They stopped short of saying that he is a suspect. What police did say is that they have new information and want to bring Smollett in for more questioning. And this follows police detaining and interrogating two brothers from Nigeria. Official sources say the two men cooperated. Evidence came out of those interrogations that said the brothers should go free. The anonymous police sources said the two men were paid by Smollett to stage the attack. They even rehearsed it. Police have things, according to the anonymous sources, like a receipt for the rope that was put around Smollett's neck. Now, as far away as Los Angeles, people have reached the conclusion that Smollett made all this up, and they're angry.
For Smollett to say that he was a victim of racism and hate crime, and we believe that is a lie, certainly is an injustice to those true victims of racism and hate crimes.
There's been some discussion that this case will go to the grand jury. When I press police about that question, they go to what has now become a familiar refrain. They want to bring Smollett in for that follow-up interview. After that, the question about the grand jury can be answered. Guys?
Mike Tobin, thank you. In the meantime, new questions about the initial reaction to the case. Many top Democrats seem to immediately take Smollett's allegations as fact. Some even sought to blame President Trump. Here's Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters reacting on the day of the alleged incident.
We have to understand this is happening for a reason. It's coming from the President of the United States. He's dog whistling every day. He's separating and dividing, and he is basically emboldening those folks who feel this way.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, in this now deleted tweet, wrote, "The racist, homophobic attack on Smollett is an affront to our humanity. No one should be attacked for who they are or whom they love." Senator and 2020 candidate Kamala Harris tweeted that the attack was an attempted, quote, modern-day lynching. Fellow 2020 candidate Senator Cory Booker used the same term to describe the attack, but here's what he's saying now.
The information is still coming out. I'm going to withhold until all the information actually comes out. Since 9/11, the majority of the terrorist attacks on our soil have been right-wing terrorist attacks.
All right. Chris, the jumping to conclusions. I mean, you take someone at their word when they say that they've been a victim of a crime. That seems logical enough. But to then go to that next extent, where you're blaming the president, I don't know, your thoughts on sort of like the hyper pile-on.
Well, what blew me away about this attack was that it didn't really seem very believable to begin with. I mean, if you hear it, and it shows you the frame of mind that a lot of these folks are in the media and in politics, that they actually think that it seems likely that there are bands of white rednecks roaming Chicago at 2 a.m. with nooses and bleach, yelling, "This is MAGA country," and attacking random people. That would be an incredibly hokey kind of television show. Nobody would watch that kind of drama. And they all jumped on it and said, of course, yeah, that sounds right. That's what Trump supporters do.
But moving on to the part where you're blaming the president for having created an environment where that happened, Kennedy, I mean, so somebody comes out and they say they were a victim of something. Yeah. I mean, to come out and make a statement, at first you're going to believe them and look into it and that sort of thing and treat them with respect out of the gate no matter what. And you don't blame anyone for doing that in this case, for sure. But kind of that next level where you had, Maxine Waters, for example, saying this is the attitude, it starts at the top, he's dividing us, look what happened.
Well, as you look at Maxine Waters and you say, okay, well, what are you doing to bring us together? What are you doing to bridge the divide? Because there is a divide in this country, and there is real racism. But when something like this happens, it's absolutely true. It diminishes the claims of other people who come forward and people who are victims of legitimate, horrific acts and intentions. But, you have to go back to the beginning and say, what motivated, if this was in fact a total fraud, and he paid this pair of brothers that he met on the set of Empire to, perpetrate this fake crime, what is the motivation? And it's to get people all riled up, but he didn't think a few steps down the road and that Chicago PD might actually have detectives and investigators who are going to go out and investigate his claims and take them very seriously and really start to parse them. And the other thing, and there was some talk that he was worried he was being written off of Empire and wanted to make a big splash. He says that the men who attacked him were white and clearly white, even though they were wearing face masks. And if that's the case, and these Nigerian brothers are that convincing of actors, then they should replace Jesse Smollett on the show.
Carly, Chris Steyerwalt said earlier today, that the whole thing about this age that we're in is that it's so much easier to be stupid faster.
On social media.
Well, you have social media, you have instant reaction. Yeah. People can put things out and they feel the need to dive into the divide.
And I think now we're sort of getting that instant reaction on the other side, where a lot of conservatives on Twitter are sort of pointing and laughing at Democrats. And I don't think it's wrong for Democratic politicians to condemn what they thought was a hate crime at the time. I just rewatched the interview that he did with Robin Roberts, and he said, you do such a disservice when you lie about things like this. He said that. Yeah. And if this turned out to be false, how the heck was anybody supposed to know? So you sort of have to let people be people and believe certain things like this.
Well, so maybe it's up to the media to be more responsible. I mean, for average people are going to pile on. You had somebody like, so April Ryan, for example, tweeting this attack on Jesse Smollett as a hate crime and should be treated as such. I mean, for us, at least, we've been through the mill before and should show a little bit more restraint.
And I think you're right about that, where there is a difference between a politician, somebody asking a politician for their feedback on a story, and a journalist jumping to a conclusion when it's their responsibility to report the facts.
Yeah, I think picking up on what you said, and I agree that the instinct to call out something that is perceived to be evil is a good and noble instinct, right? When we all see something, the problem is, and I think what the difference here in this situation is, instead of just calling out something that was evil, people jumped to lump it directly, to direct it at President Trump. And I think that's the difference here. Is I do think when we all see evil, when we all see racism and things that are unconscionable, we should call it out. Where I think, as Chris said earlier, that you alluded to, where I think everyone needs to take a deep breath, is directly linking these things to a president or to, the Democrat Party, to whatever political party. And I think that's, the main thing that we're all learning here as it relates to the Covington case as well, or as it relates to everything that we're seeing going on in Virginia on a daily basis, with the top 3 elected officials there. You have to sort of take a deep breath and say, if this happened, it's terrible, but let's not attribute things to people that, when we don't have the facts of the case.
Go ahead,
and you see things that are evil in these hate crimes. You see men dragged behind trucks. You see people attacked or denied jobs or denied a place to live. What you don't see are Donald Trump supporters in red hats saying, this is MAGA country, while attacking people in the middle of the night. That would have been hokey 1930s Batman comic. I mean, it's a cartoon villain. And for so many people to just jump on board and say, that's exactly what's going on, this is a modern day lynching, they should have stepped back and said, hold on, this This seems kind of outlandish.
True, but the big takeaway from all this is that we can't judge a situation until we have all the facts on the table, and we still don't have all the facts on the table.
And journalists who are covering it have to use words like alleged. And, but you're right about Nancy Pelosi's statement. The second half of her statement is absolutely true. No one should be attacked for what they are or who they love. And that is a universal truth, especially now. And we hope that the world is getting better and not worse. Yeah. And, we have to stop acting like this is the absolute worst time in American history.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Kennedy. The instinct to demonize each other and to think the worst of each other is something that I think is just vitriolic in today's politics. And everybody is guilty of doing it. And instead, instead of thinking the worst of people who support the president or the worst of people that support Nancy Pelosi, can we all get back to the point of remembering that we're Americans and we may have a fundamental disagreement on policy and how we get where we think America needs to be, but that doesn't mean each other are inherently evil.
This is all Twitter's fault.
It's all Twitter's fault.
It really is.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Either way, I have compassion for someone, and I know that this annoys people, but if he did make it up, I still feel really sorry for him.
Because he's got a screw loose, like something obviously is going on.
It is sad. It's sad both ways. If it's true, it's sad. If it's
but
not
it boils
true,
down to the
it's
individual.
sad.
It's not about groups, and it's not about being activated. It's one person who made a series. Apparently, at this point, we're learning a series of really bad choices. Yeah. And that's what it goes back to. And it speaks to his character. And, sure, we may be in a time where the political tenor is so loud and it feels so mean and unsustainable. But that still goes back to the individual and his reaction and intent.
Maybe you could suppress that urge to say, see, this is exactly what I was telling you about. And then it goes to whatever larger point people were trying to make. And now you see it on the other side, like you said, that now you see like, on the right, they're piling on and saying this is, we're going to blame the president for everything. In the end, the police will tell us what actually happened. And, then we'll know. But maybe we could all.
I think perpetrators in these cases where this has happened in the past tend to think that they're bringing sympathy to the larger cause. And actually, when this happens, the perpetrators are actually looking for attention for themselves. I'm not saying that's what's going on here. We don't know.
And they do the opposite of bringing sympathy.
The police will tell us, as you said. But this is not a new phenomenon in law enforcement.
All right, new calls for the Democratic chairman of the House Intelligence Committee to recuse himself from his committee's Russia investigation as questions are raised over his meeting with one of the men behind the Steele dossier. We'll debate that. Plus, we're watching new protests outside the White House against the president's declaration of a national emergency as there's growing legal and political challenges to the plan. What's the way forward for President Trump and the country?
To this country. But you cannot wait and
Well, it is heating up. New protests outside the White House against the president's national emergency declaration amid escalating legal challenges to his efforts to help secure funding for a wall on the southern border. Senior advisor to the president, Stephen Miller, on Fox News Sunday, predicting a huge portion of the wall will be built.
What the president was saying is that like past presidents, he could choose to ignore this crisis, choose to ignore this emergency, as others have, but that's not what he's going to do. Well, you're going to see probably a couple hundred miles in time I would say, by the end of the next appropriation cycle.
So by the end of this year,
by the end of,
hundreds of miles?
Next fiscal year, one more after this.
Okay, so by September of 2020.
Right.
Right in the middle of the presidential campaign.
What timing? Meantime, the first lawsuit challenging the emergency declaration has been filed by liberal advocacy group Public Citizen and California Attorney General Javier Becerra. He says he's working with several other states to mount another legal challenge, quote, imminently. Let's take a look.
A number of states and certainly Americans will be harmed, and we're all going to be prepared. He himself said it. He did not need to announce or declare a crisis. He did not have to call this an emergency. He has also said he knows he's going to lose in court.
Well, that's fine. Even multiple Republicans in the House and Senate object to the national emergency declaration. Among them, border state Republican Congressman Will Hurd.
Our government was designed for the most ultimate power, the power of the purse, to reside within Congress, and we shouldn't have an executive, I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat, that tries to get around Congress with this national emergency. I'm always open to making sure that Congress takes back some of its power as a co-equal branch of government.
Amen. What a wonderful time for that discussion. And revisiting the Constitution, Will Hurd also brought up some great points, Chris, about eminent domain in Texas and how thousands of ranchers have plots of land that will indeed be ripe for a government taking. And they will fight the federal government in court over that.
Republicans in Congress are kind of funny on this because they're always pushing back and saying that Congress needs to assert itself against the executive. But every time they come into power, usually the first thing they cut is their own congressional budgets. John Boehner cut Congress's budget and then said, we'll deal with the executive later. It's no surprise that everyone who's in Congress in their mid-20s, maybe their first or second job, or you're fighting career employees, and they're going to beat them most of the time. But President Trump seems to have learned his lesson on the earlier immigration ban rollouts and things like that. Our legal analyst at the News Foundation, Kevin Daly, said that by focusing on building walls in Texas first and using congressional money that's already been appropriated and using money from the Treasury that's already been seized, he's going to severely limit the amount of people who have the ability to bring a lawsuit against him to the Fifth Circuit or maybe to Washington, D.C.'s more moderate circuit. And that's going to make it so that by the time California really has standing to sue him, he's going to have actually built, like Stephen Miller said, a lot of this wall.
Well, Hawaii is jumping in as well because they've got some tremendous issues with their porous borders. I mean, I was really surprised to see Hawaii being lumped in with Oregon and California. It's like, you
never
get
know.
them.
You know, what's interesting is this is being compared a lot to President Obama's move as it relates to DACA. And I'm not a lawyer, but I did talk to a few people this morning to try to get a better understanding of the difference between when President Obama made the DACA move versus President Trump's national emergency move. And one of the points that was made is that DACA, Republicans made, was actually abuse of prosecutorial discretion. That's a long word for a Monday. But essentially, a prosecutor can say, I'm not going to prosecute you, Melissa, because you're here illegally, and I'm just going to choose not to use my resources to do that. There's a difference between that versus saying, Melissa, not only am I not going to prosecute you, I'm going to confer legal status on you versus via an executive order. And so the president and his team will point to a number of times that plenty of things have been approved via a national emergency, and that's, I think, where they're going to parse the difference between what President Obama did and what President Trump has done.
Well, it's really interesting because so much more power is going to shift to the Supreme Court in terms of their, if it does make its way to the Supreme Court, and that will become critical for liberals and conservatives, because conservatives will see that the sky is falling. The next president has to be a Democrat in order to rebalance the court, because the president is saying no matter what the legal challenges are, it'll go to the Ninth Circuit, then the appellate court will lose, then it'll go to the Supreme Court, and we will win because there is a conservative majority.
Although I'm not totally sure that he's right about that. I mean, he's done a bunch of things along the way to kind of undermine his own case. I mean, when he stood there and said, I don't really need to do this, you're like, yikes.
Yeah.
That was...
It does sort of lessen the emergency part of it.
Yeah, it does make it tough. I mean, other legal experts have said it matters so much more what he writes versus what he says. And of course, in that very long press conference, he did say almost everything. So, you know, you could kind of put something into every little basket there. But I don't know that his competence at the Supreme Court level, again, I'm not a lawyer either, it doesn't necessarily seem to me like that is for sure the case. And he had a bunch of evidence to go, and it was that one piece of money that he wanted for this. It was only a few of those billions that he was putting together, of those 8, that depended on calling it a national emergency.
And speaking of the legality, and Kennedy, something that you brought up was Will Hurd talking about the 1,000 farmers that could stand to lose land. There are still people in court over the 2006 Secure Fence Act that are trying to figure out money that they are owed.
You're absolutely right. Those eminent domain cases can take a long time.
Absolutely. So the legality of all this is going to take a long time, and that wall is there, so you can still build a wall on land even when you're still working out the money aspect of it. I just don't think that President Trump needed to do this. I mean, the proposal was bad, and he signed a bad plan, but he's the ultimate spin master. He could have spun it into a win. 55 new miles of fencing, 120 miles of fencing that we're going to make better.
More money for judges.
Exactly. Yeah. $3 billion that he could have used that doesn't need a national emergency to obtain.
If Congress wants to take their power back, then why don't you figure out what the holes are in the theoretical immigration fence and fix those and figure out how many people need to come into this country and work legally and make the system better so Beto O'Rourke doesn't have to callous his poor hands by tearing the fence down himself.
And Congress has no interest in solving this problem. Republicans would rather see it in their rearview mirror. They think it's a hot-button issue that's not going to help them. Democrats are completely against it. They're not willing to solve the Dreamer issue like when President Trump suggested that last, and they're certainly not willing to provide more funds for this wall. So he's dealing with a Congress that has zero interest and zero motivation to try and fix this immigration.
But it's too bad they don't want to use that as an opportunity to seize back their power, like you said. That would be great.
Yeah, do your job.
Do your job.
Stop complaining about it. Or not, you. Democrats divided over Amazon, scuttling plans to build a second headquarters in New York City and taking thousands of jobs with them. Can the Dems unite on this issue heading into 2020, or do they hate money? Plus, President Trump now accusing former FBI acting director Andrew McCabe and Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein of pursuing an, quote, illegal and treasonous plot against his presidency. This after McCabe's explosive 60 Minutes interview. We've got all the details ahead. Stay right here.
We talked about why the president had insisted on firing the director. And in the context of that conversation, the Deputy Attorney General offered to wear a wire into the White House.
New reaction to explosive new claims from former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe. McCabe saying the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein was serious about secretly recording President Trump and discussed removing the president from office. Watch this.
The Deputy Attorney General offered to wear a wire into the White House. He said, I never get searched when I go into the White House. I could easily wear a recording device. They wouldn't know it was there. Now, he was not joking. He was absolutely serious. And in fact, he brought it up in the next meeting we had.
Today, President Trump tweeting, wow, so many lies by disgraced acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe. He was fired for lying. And now his story gets even more deranged. He and Rod Rosenstein, who was hired by Jeff Sessions, another beauty, looked like they were planning a very illegal act and got caught. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham spoke before the McCabe interview aired. Graham saying that he plans to subpoena McCabe and Rosenstein unless they voluntarily agree to testify. I'm sure they will. Watch this.
We're a democracy. People enforce the law, can't take it in their own hands. And was this an attempted bureaucratic coup? I don't know. I don't know who's telling the truth. I know Rosenstein's vehemently denied it, but we're going to get to the bottom of it.
So, Chris, just focusing in on what new we learned by watching the interview last night versus the stuff we knew before. So I was shocked by the way he really categorized the whole thing as like it was all Rod Rosenstein's idea. Like he was sort of like when he do you notice that too?
Yeah,
when
somebody was getting thrown under the bus.
Yes. I mean, it was like he's like, I walked into this room and he brings up this idea. And even when Scott Pelley said to him, like, you know, what were you thinking? And he goes, I was thinking, how did I get here? You know, like he's this passive person who is a fly on the wall while Rod Rosenstein was cooking up this scheme to go and, you know, record the president and get him out of office. I mean, that was you were thinking similar thoughts?
Absolutely. I had the same thought as you when I was watching it last night. I said, this is, it almost distracted from the book because it was clearly such a premeditated effort for whatever reason. I don't know why, but it was clearly McCabe had decided that he wanted to go after Rosenstein and was going to make it an issue there. I think, you know, Rosenstein came out and said they mischaracterized the meeting. Right. And so there was a lot of fighting between the two of them. So, you know, we don't know who is telling the truth. But here you have the number 2 of the FBI, who was, of course, fired and has been accused of the, from the IG, from within the FBI, of having perhaps told not told the truth about his leaks to the media. And then you have the number 2 at the DOJ essentially giving, you know, opposite stories and accusing each other of lying, essentially. I mean, that's what's going on here. We have number 2 at FBI, number 2 of DOJ saying that guy's lying. That's a bad situation for our FBI and our Department of Justice to be in. We can't sugarcoat that.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, one of the other things I thought was really interesting was that he kept not being specific about why. they wanted to remove the president? Like, what was the problem? You know, they talked about...
He's icky.
He said, like...
he tweets.
Yeah. Gross. It was like we were saying, this president, his capacity, his intent, but he didn't say, you know, because we thought he was colluding with Russia, he just kept saying, you know, like, here we were in this wide-ranging conversation about removing the president, but not really like, why did he need... Why the 25th Amendment? Why didn't he need to be removed? Did you notice that, or?
The whole thing is, it's insane, and it's really scary that that's how people who are really high up in these critical departments are operating surreptitiously, and it's awful. It's not okay, and there has to be some accountability. The accountability can't just be you have two guys who are really mad at each other now, so they're saying mean things, trying to contradict the other and ruin the other's reputation. That is not accountability. This cannot happen, and I know everyone makes fun of limited government libertarians and the liberty-minded who want to pare down the scope of the surveillance state, but this is why, because people have so much power concentrated in so few humans that they really feel emboldened to operate this way, and it is wrong. It is not how this country should operate, regardless of who the president is.
And if this was a TV show, it could have been written by Smollett. I mean, it's a hokey script again. Where do our FBI agents learn how to act, where they're going to say, all right, let's wear a wire into the White House, let's say it's true. And then what are they going to do? None of them have the power to remove the president. Their plan was to get Vice President Mike Pence to remove President Trump if they wore a wire. If this is true at all, it shows you that our FBI at the top is not as smart as our FBI rank and file.
But don't you think the acting FBI director should have, at that point, been so outraged by the idea, the suggestion?
Sessions? I mean, you were talking...
No, I'm talking about McCabe.
Remember that
the FBI director. McCabe was the acting FBI director, but he should have gone, hell no, we're not going to remove the president via the 25th Amendment. Sure, we don't like him. He does things that we think are untoward and gross and wrong, but that is not grounds for, you know, us, just a few guys in a room, removing the president.
But don't forget, this went to the general counsel as well. That's what Rosenstein said last night. So it wasn't just the people in the room. It wasn't, you know, one person says it's a joke. Rosenstein apparently went and told to the the general counsel. So there was a lot of people that were in on this discussion for it to be.
And if I could, my antennas went up twice during this conversation. It was one time when he was asked, when did the 25th Amendment conversation come up? And he said he can't remember. You can't remember when that happened. That's like a flash forward to when the hearings are going to start. I'm sure that's going to be his answer for a lot of things. And also, when he started the obstruction of justice charge, he said it was because if he was going to get fired, he wanted to make sure that none of these things went away. But that's not how this works, as I'm sure you can attest to. Investigations just don't go away because somebody gets fired, and he knows that. So for him to try and sell that to the American people is a big question as well, and I think we need some clarification on that point.
Well, I guess and that begs the question, will we get clarification? Because that's how we started this segment, talking about the idea that they want to have a hearing and they want these guys to come in and testify. And I'm not sure we ever get any further down the road when we do that.
Okay, if Rod Rosenstein is such a compromised person, he's the one who launched this special counsel investigation. So is that all a sham as well, based on Anna McCain's logic?
All right, the failed Amazon deal to bring a new headquarters to New York City now driving a wedge between Democrats. What this says about the party's position on jobs and big business and the impact it could have on the 2020 campaign. We'll debate that next.
We're going to have to make a decision, in all seriousness, as a nation, Republicans and Democrats. Are we an entrepreneurial, capitalist nation? Do we want jobs, and do we want to succeed?
A new debate over the direction of the Democratic Party as some of the party's top 2020 contenders hit the campaign trail today. Here you see New Jersey Senator Cory Booker in New Hampshire. Back in the senator's home state and around the country, Democrats are dealing with fallout after, in the face of protest from progressives, Amazon scuttled a deal to build a headquarters in New York City. A few days ago, 2020 hopeful Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeted, in part, "How long will we allow giant corporations to hold our democracy hostage?" But New Jersey Democratic Congressman Jeff Van Drew saying he supports Amazon opening up in his state.
This is the world we live in now. I know some people don't like corporations or don't like incentivizing corporations, but I think that we have to compete, and we certainly have to make sure that we create jobs.
And New York's only Democrat Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney here.
It used to be that we would protest wars. Now we're protesting jobs. If this had gone through, it would have made overnight New York City the high-tech capital of the East Coast. I'm a progressive too, but I'm pragmatic. If someone's going to bring a job to my district, to my city, and billions of dollars in tax revenue.
Carolyn, one of many congresswomen in New York. You know, the politics behind this, Chris, are fascinating to me because, you know, as we just saw in these clips here, you have people that, especially the mayor of New York City, they know they can't attack Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other liberals, so they're attacking Amazon.
De Blasio has. He went after her.
Well, he went after Amazon today, and Elizabeth Warren did as well. So I think politically, the easier thing for them to do is to attack Amazon as opposed to other liberals.
This is a great battle. It's the battle of the corporate Democrats who want to give billions of dollars to one of the biggest companies in the entire planet, and the Democrats who are socialists who want to tear that down and say that taxpayer money shouldn't go to corporations.
They're not giving billions of dollars. I have to stop you right there. They are not giving billions of dollars to Amazon. Amazon's being allowed to keep the money that it's made as opposed to having the government confiscate it and waste it.
But I mean, that's different from any other company that's in the area.
So the answer is not
that. The answer is, but there are subsidies as well that they're going after, and a lot of these big corporations go after. And you're right about that. The corporate welfare aspect, that's the one area where I agree with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But that is not okay. We don't have to give billions and billions of dollars in incentives to corporations like Amazon who already have billions and billions of dollars. They can go ahead and build wherever they want. She is wrong, though, when she says that they shouldn't bring headquarters to New York City, where it's not just the people who would go and work for Amazon. You know, this is not just a child labor factory. These are good-paying jobs. But think about the vendors. Think about the restaurants. Think about the dry cleaners and all the other industries that would pop up around the big, beautiful.
But the answer is not to take away from Amazon. When you say corporate welfare, the answer is to lower the burden that you're putting on the other businesses. It's not to say, no, Amazon, you go away and we're not going to do this. It's to make government smaller. Stop spending so much damn money and shrink yourselves rather than depending on the revenue.
Well, let's get Carly in here. Carly, do you see this as being a big break between Democrats, the ones who, as I said earlier, are pro-jobs versus the ones who are pro or anti any sort of corporate?
Sure. Well, it is a huge split, and it feels like it's, you know, establishment Democrats and then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Lonely Island again. I understand what you're saying about the incentives. $3 billion is crazy, but everybody, every state that wanted Amazon in their, you know, district, in their state, was giving them that kind of money or offering it.
Yeah, Maryland offered $8.5 billion.
It's kind of like Amazon is like the beauty queen that walks into a bar and everybody's buying it a drink, and they're not used to people playing hardball with them. So they said, the heck with New York, I'm out of here. And you can't blame a big company like that.
I'm not surprised about that, but I would say that one thing I think is funny is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez once again accidentally became a huge elitist, much like with the green energy, where she was going to make energy more expensive for